My days working, taking care of my little ones can be a lot. I checked out Care.com and it was so easy for me to find local, experienced, and background check sitters. Finding our babysitter was way more affordable than I thought. Care.com makes it super easy. Search for qualified candidates. You can view their profiles, read reviews and ratings, check their availability, send messages directly, and get the help that you need. Care.com should be every person's go-to.
I'm Tim Fitzgerald at GoPowerCat.com.
And I'm Scott Chasen with Fog.net.
This is a replay of WIBW's TV show, The Drive.
Here's this week's episode on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network.
Good evening, Wildcat and Jayhawk fans, and welcome to The Drive, sponsored by FlintHillsAuto.com. I am Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com. The man to my right is Scott Chasen of Fog.net, and you had a game to cover. I did not, so I got to watch almost all of your game.
Yeah.
And I thought KU was the better team.
It'll be interesting. You know, there were a couple of plays that really swung the balance, and also I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for coming in. I know it's your birthday today.
I had no idea.
Happy. Oh, it is.
No.
It's not your birthday.
No.
Oh, that's weird. I thought we had the same birthday. Anyway.
Happy birthday, Scott.
Oh, thanks, Fitz. I really appreciate that.
You can interact with us on social media at Facebook.com/The Drive Show, on Twitter at The Drive 13, and of course, answer a weekly poll question and make your game predictions over at TheDriveShow.com. And remember, if you ever miss an episode of The Drive, you can listen to an audio-only version that will appear each Monday morning in the form of a podcast at GoPowerCat.com and Fog.net. And we start things off with our 2-minute drill. And the 2-minute drill is sponsored by Houlihan's. They've been expecting you. Now, let's eat.
Well, Kansas State took the weekend off, but the Wildcats moved into the AP Top 25 at 24 and rose to number 22 in the coaches poll. Fitz, is this an ideal spot for the Wildcats heading into Big 12 play?
It is. I mean, they go to Oklahoma State, and, you know, it's funny, if you go through this Big 12 schedule for K-State and try to figure out what games are on the road and at home and what's going to be the toughest games outside of Oklahoma and Texas. And part of our PowerCat podcast this week, we went through all that, and we came to a determination that, without a doubt, since Iowa State isn't playing particularly well, although they scored 7,000 points on Saturday, that going to Oklahoma State next Saturday probably is the toughest conference game for the Wildcats outside of going to Texas and having Oklahoma and Manhattan. So this is a big game for K-State. They go in now on the fringe of the national, radar. People are talking about them a little bit. Because now, in hindsight, Mississippi State hosted Kentucky on Saturday and beat those Wildcats pretty handily. This Mississippi State win looks a lot better for Kansas State. I think they're probably in the right spot for them. You know, they're ranked. They've got some attention on them right now. They've got some expectations that maybe they didn't have from the outside going into the season. And if they can start rattling off wins, and we'll get into that a little bit more in the show, they play this game, then they come home and play Baylor, and then they got another off week because, 3 weeks off, 2 weeks off. We got to have our rest. It's the media. We need it. And then they play host to TCU. They could start 6-0, and that would really put them in a really nice position in terms of rankings if they can get that done. And I just don't know, Scott. I don't know if this team can win at Oklahoma State. I watched all that Oklahoma State-Texas game. Oklahoma State's good. It's good. They have a good running back quarterback combination. It's going to be very interesting to see if this team can play well enough on both sides of the ball to win at Stillwater.
I wanted to ask you, locally, the attention K-State is getting definitely deserved, but I am curious, do you feel like the national spotlight has come with a lot of that attention that certainly people who follow Big 12 teams have kind of put on them?
Yeah, I think people are paying attention to K-State a little bit more. I think there's still some doubters in the national media. I get it. They don't think much of the 3 wins, although if you win in the SEC, isn't that supposed to be the greatest thing ever? So we'll see how the team does now. They're 0-0. K-State's 0-0 in the Big 12. Everyone, at least going into this week, was 0-0 in the Big 12. So you got a chance to get off to a good start, and it's really a new season. That's your cliche of the week. KU was unable to follow the Boston College blowout with another win, but the Jayhawks hung tough with West Virginia in the 29-24 loss on Saturday. Scott, put this one in perspective.
Well, you mentioned it at the beginning. You could watch that game and think the Jayhawks were the better team, but at the very least, there's been this gap between the 9th best team in the Big 12, whoever that may be, and Kansas. That gap has been there. You think about Baylor, that one year where they were winless. They came, I think it was in Lawrence, they beat them something like 38-9, and it was just a blowout game that KU was never in, and this was not one of those games. Yes, I think you can look at the offense. We will talk about the offense. You can look at the play calling. You can look at coaching decisions, minor things. There was a 4th and 2 around midfield that normally Les Miles is going to go for it, and the wind was kind of against the Jayhawks, so punting was going to be an issue. They didn't go for it. So you can look at those little decisions, or maybe, the onside kick was a huge moment in the game. The Jayhawks went for an onside kick, but because the ball did not bounce, Jamal Horn, who recovered the ball for Kansas, had to give the West Virginia player more space to catch the ball. He had to give him a 1-yard cushion. He could not be within a yard of him, essentially like a punt return, until he had a chance to secure the ball, so it was called back. You could look at those little things. I think, though, the big picture, the overview, and the takeaway is that, hey, Kansas is still continuing to move in the right direction. Certainly Boston College wasn't a fluke. Maybe it was the maximum potential of how good you can look, and maybe the other team not quite taking you 100% seriously. But I think that's where you start to build. You can go to the crowd, too. KU had 35,000 plus in Memorial Stadium. That was a legitimate 35,000 plus. It was the best student crowd that I've personally seen, and I've covered the team going back to Charlie Weiss. So I think if you want to find signs of progress, they're there. If you want to find reasons to say, hey, hold on, this isn't quite a 4-win team, maybe even not a 3-win team yet, and if you want to take that pessimistic, prove it viewpoint, you'll find what you're looking for too. But like you said at the beginning, KU at least hung tough. You can't argue that KU wasn't right there, talent, scheme, whatever, right there with left.
Yeah, I think KU is better, although I do question, honestly, if David Beatty was the coach, if these improvements still wouldn't be apparent. But they are better, and West Virginia is not very good.
Yeah,
they did not look good.
That's the other side of the coin, too, right? Because obviously you're playing another team, and look, West Virginia, schematically on offense, they did some things in the first half I thought were kind of interesting. But then once you kind of figure that out, and all of a sudden that offense starts to fade away, yeah, West Virginia is going to struggle in some of these games this year.
Oklahoma State pushed Texas and Austin, and TCU somehow lost at home to SMU. Does this mean the Big 12 is good or bad in terms of being compared to other conferences around the nation?
Well, it's funny, a week ago we're talking about how good the Big 12 looks, and it's tricky because when teams beat each other in the conference, like it goes one of two ways. Either you have those few teams who rise to the top in the conferences that have 1, 2, 3, 4 like really good teams. Those seem to always be put over the other ones, even though some of the other ones might be deeper. But you've seen, especially like Iowa State kind of fading into the background. The Big 12 is kind of waiting. Texas too, that lost to LSU. The Big 12 is kind of waiting for those auxiliary teams to emerge. I think K-State has a great chance to be one of those teams, but right now I'm not going to say the national profile is compromised, but I am going to say it's certainly not what it could have been. Well, I guess maybe expectations weren't as high, then it kind of jumped up and maybe is back down a touch.
Well, you got to say that Texas has a home loss to an SEC opponent, even though it's a really good one in LSU. So that doesn't look great for the conference. I love this play. And it, I think the Longhorns are good, but I just don't know how good. We're in a situation, it's so early in the season, I can't tell if Oklahoma State was really good and hanging out with Texas, or if Texas wasn't good enough just to finish off an Oklahoma State team that they shouldn't have had problems with. So I was just really kind of confused by this game. I couldn't get a grip on it, and I was really baffled by TCU. I watched this game almost beginning to end. And at first, my big hot takeaway was that SMU's uniforms were really awesome because they honored Dallas. They were really slick looking. But TCU just looked bad. They looked bad on offense. They looked bad on defense, which is hard to explain. I know they're playing the freshman quarterback now. They just don't seem to have an identity on that side of the ball. So now we're talking about Iowa State maybe not being as good as people expected. Maybe TCU isn't as good as people expected, although they're coming off a win at Minnesota. I can't explain this conference, but you're right. I think if there's one team poised right now to kind of step up into that third slot, the auxiliary space, I love that. Right below Oklahoma, Texas, it is K-State if they can start rattling off some wins.
How would you classify the league right now? People say top heavy, good depth. Where are you putting the Big 12?
I don't know. I would say top heavy. like as in Oklahoma. Maybe Texas is good enough to be with them. But right now, if you look at the national polls, I think clearly the SEC's got the cream of the crop, as they usually do, and then there's Clemson. I watched that Notre Dame game. It's fun having an off week. You get to watch a bunch of football.
Yeah.
I watched Notre Dame play at Georgia. Notre Dame looked legitimate even though they lost. So I think there's better teams out there right now, and Oklahoma's going to have problems if this conference doesn't play up to its standards and offer them a reason why that they can show that they belong in the playoff.
Yeah, especially if they slip up once or twice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now a quick look at your poll question results. Poll questions brought to you by Film 11, your Go Fast, Look Good, Play Hard custom shop.
Well, last week's question was, KU football snapped a 48-game road losing streak against Power 5 opponents on Friday. When will the Jayhawks' next Power 5 road win come? Choice A, 2019 in Big 12 play, got 30% of the vote. 2020, choice B, got 50%, and 2021 or beyond, 20% of the vote.
So 20% K-State fans, 30% optimistic KU fans, and 50% people like, I don't know, I'm just going to pick B. That's how I got through school.
Yeah.
This week's question is this. K-State opens Big 12 play at Oklahoma State and then meets Baylor and TCU in Manhattan. How will the Wildcats fare in those three games? We've been talking about the importance of these three that leads up to the Oklahoma game. A, 3 wins. B, 2 wins, 1 loss. C, 1 win, 2 losses. D, 3 losses. See what we did there? We covered all your bases.
Yeah.
Make sure you vote over thedriveshow.com.
You should have made him pick every individual game and had about 35 different choices, or however it would have worked out.
I'm not sure Aaron, the producer, would appreciate that.
No, probably not. Well, that will do it for this half of the 2-minute drill, but we will be right back with more on KU and K-State on The Drive.
So I'm a father of one. I gotta find a babysitter. I found Care.com and I was blown away. Through the platform, I was able to find local and experienced candidates along with their reviews and rates, which were way more affordable than I anticipated. Care.com really put me at ease knowing that they were all required to go through a background check. If you're like me and you need to find someone reliable for your childcare necessities, check out Care.com. Find the ideal sitters for your childcare needs.
Welcome back to The Drive as we continue your 2-minute drill. And the 2-minute drill is brought to you by Hula Hands. They've been expecting you. Now let's eat.
Well, K-State goes to Oklahoma State on Saturday and then plays host to Baylor and TCU to open Big 12 play.
Where have we heard that before?
What are the keys to the Wildcats finding early success in conference action?
I have notes. I actually prepared.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Number one, Kansas State's got to continue to run the ball like they have been. And it's not just, simple running plays. It's the way they get into those running plays, all the shifts and movements and get defenses out of alignment. You can actually have a numerical advantage on K-State at the point of attack, and because of the way they go about it, they'll find your crease, they'll find someone out of a gap and accomplish that. So teams are going to start walking up into the box and really trying to stop that running game because it's clear that that's K-State's bread and butter. So that means Skylar Thompson's really got to continue to deliver the ball in the passing game and do a good job. So if you can get a running game that's halfway decent and Skylar Thompson's putting the ball and the money down the field, this offense is going to be really hard to contain. Now, kind of bridging the gap between offense and defense, K-State's got to be good on third downs, and they have been. They have gotten off the field defensively on third down, but they've also converted third downs offensively. They've been very good in those situations. This K-State running game just sets a great play action for them, and that's something that can really come into play if they're in a disadvantage on third down, 3rd and 6, 3rd and long, so to speak. Defensively, this team's really got to continue to pressure the quarterback. They didn't do much pressuring the quarterback until they went to Mississippi State, and they started to really kind of crank down the pressure a little bit, gave the Mississippi State quarterbacks different looks, kind of forced some turnovers against them, and also when a quarterback's not comfortable in the pocket, they make mistakes. So that's really important. And Scott, I think the final key is what ended up helping them win the game at Mississippi State, despite the 2 muff punts, which Texas also had 2 muff punts against Oklahoma State. Apparently it's a league trend, was being better in special teams. Don't get greedy here. Just be better than your opponent. And despite those muff punts, because of the Malik Knowles 100-yard kickoff return, K-State won on special teams against Mississippi State, and I think that at the end of the day was the difference. So there's your 5 keys for continued success.
We've heard about Andy Reid off a bye week. What about Chris Kleiman off a
That'll
bye?
be interesting. Yeah, this will be our first experience. You know, Coach Snyder had a really good reputation for that. I think as things progressed, maybe that wasn't the same, but yeah, we're going to see how much better this K-State team has gotten, because Chris Kleiman, when asked about what does your team need to get better at, everything. I mean, he said, we are really not that good a football team yet, even though we're 3-0. So for everyone who wants to say they're much different, that sounded very Bill Snyder-like. Well, Scott, after throwing 3 touchdowns against Boston College, Carter Stanley threw 3 more against the Mountaineers. But is there something you see holding back the Kansas offense at this point?
All right, a quarterback at Kansas throws for 3 touchdowns in back-to-back games. You feel pretty good about that Kansas quarterback. I mean, that doesn't happen or hasn't happened, I guess, under recent coaches of the Jayhawks. Now, look, Carter Stanley is a little bit different, maybe not than some of the past quarterbacks. I think stylistically, he could actually be kind of similar to a guy like Montel Cozart, but what is holding back the KU offense right now? I go to 2 things. The first, I think, is turnovers. Carter Stanley, in the first game, the Jayhawks had 3 turnovers by fumble. Carter Stanley involved in all 3 of those plays. You go to week 2, you have a couple interceptions and then another fumble, albeit not a lost fumble. You go to the week after that, you start off the game with an interception, and then again in this game, another interception, a fumble. These are issues that KU, that Peyton Bender, he was kind of a statue in the pocket, you'll recall, for KU last year, but he didn't put the ball in jeopardy like this, and certainly fumbling wasn't as much of an issue just because he wasn't doing as much running. So I think that's one area for sure where Carter Stanley probably has to at least get things under control. The second, it comes with play calling, and this is not me just complaining about Les Miles and saying run versus pass or Les Kenning or who's calling the plays and all these things. This is a simple matter of KU taking what is available, what the defense is going to give them. West Virginia, the first half of that game, clearly came into the contest saying, you are not going to run the ball against us. And they had success doing that. They bottled Khalil Herbert up. Puka Williams didn't reach the 100-yard mark. I think he was somewhere around 75, 76 rushing yards. So West Virginia did a good job there. KU didn't take shots early or take enough shots. They didn't open the game up. Obviously, the Jayhawks trying to play a little bit of the field possession game or just control time of possession. However, Les Miles even said at halftime that maybe it was time to ask Carter Stanley to do more. He said after the game he would have liked to see some more deep shots. I know sometimes when you don't have the most maybe faith in your quarterback, you don't want to just send him out there, especially when your strength is a run game, but I think the two have to complement each other.
Yeah, you know, it's so hard being a quarterback because you have to take chances, but you can't take chances. You know, you got to put the ball in smart places, but that sometimes means slightest error, it's a dumb place. And also, you got to have faith that your receivers are going to run the right route, and then they don't run the right route.
Yeah.
And you throw the interception, and everyone says you stink when you threw the ball exactly where it needed to be thrown.
Yeah, now I will say this. KU offense has put up points. That's a great sign for them. And the interception Stanley threw was a pretty remarkable play by the defensive back. That being said, they clean up a few things, and you're talking about wins.
Yeah, there's progress. You can see it. And now it's time to step out of bounds.
Well, UCLA had scored 50 points in the second half to rally for a 67-63 victory at number 19 Washington State. The game that ended around 1 a.m. on Saturday night. Is Pac-12 after dark good for college football? Fitz?
It's fantastic for fans. I mean, if I couldn't sleep. I was watching after, this game was not competitive in the first half. Washington State got away from them. Washington State's on their home field, ranked 19th in the country. It's going to be a blowout. Look at the records. We're 3-0 versus the visiting team 0-3. I gave up on this game. I apologize, Pac-12. I forgot how weird you are. And I should have stuck with it because 50 points in the second half, UCLA came back, finally showing Chip Kelly kind of making some good progress there that UCLA fans have expected, but they haven't been good.
Yeah.
They haven't been good at all. They've been really bad, and for one glorious half, they were beautiful. But is it good for college football? It's great for the fans. It's horrible for the Pac-12.
Look, here's the way I put it. For people in the Midwest and maybe even the Mountain Time Zone, it's great. You get done watching whatever games are going on, a lot of stuff going on, East Coast time, all these things. And then now you get to kind of end your day. Sometimes it's a blowout, sometimes whatever, but you get some kind of wacky stuff. I like when Bill Walton is on the call for the basketball games, and it just kind of has a little bit of a different feel to it. the issue, and this goes back to everything, and it's why 9 a.m. doesn't work, and it's why the late game doesn't work. I mean, that game ends at 1 a.m. Think about watching that and somewhere on the East Coast. It's 2 a.m. there. Now, I know it's a Saturday. I know you probably don't have to get up early, whatever, but like at a certain point, they'll have to figure out something, because 9 a.m. is not the answer, but also 2 a.m. on the East Coast is not the answer.
But it's 11 p.m. still at the venue. It's still
that's
late
fair.
even on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's late here too.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
But I appreciate them being stupid. It's like all of college football said, okay, now let's get weird and turn on the Pac-12 game.
That is what the Pac-12 is. The Pac-12 should get its own playoff. I don't know how it would work.
Yeah.
You just put Alabama against each Pac-12 team one after the other. I'd watch it at 11 p.m.
Well, that's a bad loss for Washington State.
Well, now let's hear from the fans. Our fan question this week is...
I'll read this.
Sure.
Since for you, I got it.
Yes.
Scott! He yelled that. That's why he yelled. Why did it take the KU offense so long to start throwing the ball? That's from Davis in Topeka.
Yeah, it definitely took the KU offense a while to start throwing the ball. And, there is not one great answer to this question yet, in part because KU doesn't make its coordinators available. You can't go and ask them, hey, why weren't you throwing the ball? But Les Miles seemed to indicate that KU identified a schematic advantage coming into this game, that they could have these kind of deep shots open. And you saw it in the second half. Andrew Parchment, a one-play, 75-yard drive for a touchdown on a pass from Carter Stanley, and he was wide open. The Jayhawks have identified some of these things throughout the year. They have a wide receivers coach in Emmett Jones, who is especially well respected. You would expect to see them take more shots. I think it's a fair question to ask why they didn't throw the ball earlier, and I'm not sure there's a great answer for you.
I sometimes feel like coaches go into games, this is what we're going to do, and get so committed to that they won't adjust.
And to Kansas's credit, at halftime, it seemed like they adjusted and opened the offense up, but it doesn't always work that way. Remember to ask us your questions on our Facebook page and on Twitter at The Drive 13. When we return, we will look at our predictions here on The Drive.
Getting the crew together isn't as easy as it used to be. We get it. Life comes at you fast. But trust us, your pals are desperate for a good hang. And when they hear you stock the party with drinks from Drizzly, they'll be banging down your door. Let Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery, take care of the supplies. All you need is an excuse. It doesn't even have to be a good one. It's your dog's birthday. The loquats are finally ripe. Whatever. With Drizzly, you can compare prices on a massive selection of beer, wine, and spirits and get them delivered straight to your door. Which means you can entice the crew to leave their houses without ever leaving yours. Whatever the occasion, download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Welcome back to The Drive as we head down the home stretch of this week's show, and now it's time to take a look at our predictions. The predictions are brought to you by Vanderbilt, your work boot center. And remember to make your weekly predictions over at thedriveshow.com. And here are last week's results. It looks like Scott's smarter than everyone else, and I'm a dummy. That pretty much summarizes that. And now here's this week's. We start with Iowa State as a pick'em at Baylor. You say...
Iowa State's looked rough. I'll take them and not feel great about it.
Okay, I'll take Baylor. I don't know who to pick in that. Next is K-State plus 7.5 points at Oklahoma State.
Who you got? I'm
going to take K-State.
I'll go with Oklahoma State on that one. I'm intrigued to see what they do.
I can get a read on these teams. And our last game of the week is Kansas plus 16.5. Now, it opened at 20, so it's coming down at TCU.
I'll take Kansas in this one. I'll see riding maybe some positive momentum despite the loss.
I'll go with KU too. I think they'll cover that. Again, make your picks over at thedriveshow.com. And now it's time for our On the Clock segment. And On the Clock is sponsored by Carpet One. Buy local for a strong local community. Let's start with Mr. Scott Chasen.
Well, simple enough, a road test for KU. The Jayhawks had some swagger on the road going to Boston College. They'll look to see if they can keep it up. TCU hammered them the last time these teams met in Fort Worth.
Can you tell we're running behind? Hey, this K-State game's on ESPN+. I know a lot of you are confused. We'll have information at GoPowerCat.com, shameless plug, to get you through that problem. It's actually a pretty fun way to watch college football. And that's it for this week's edition of The Drive. And we will see you next week right here and all week on social media.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.